Welcome everybody to this presentation of how to get kids to listen. I'm McNicholl, a teacher of the deaf and special educator for hearing. I will be presenting along with two other presenters, Jasmine Darry and Hannah King, who will introduce themselves during their sections. Firstly, I'm going to speak about the importance of developing listening skills, and then we'll move into setting up a listening environment that is good for listening comprehension. Hearing is a first-order event in the mainstream classroom. If a child cannot hear spoken instruction, the entire premise of the educational system is undermined. I think this quote speaks for itself. It is imperative that our children can not only hear, but also can develop appropriate listening comprehension skills in order to access education. Studies in education have shown that the average normal hearing child misses around 25% of what is said in the mainstream classroom. Classrooms are auditory environments. Children spend as much as 50% of the school day in a listening environment. Difficulty in hearing and listening often results in disruptive behaviour and learning difficulties. Children require significantly better acoustic signals and listening skills in order to understand language. Now let's look at why. Adults have a skill called auditory cognitive closure that allows them to fill in gaps if they don't hear some of the information a speaker is trying to convey. Children haven't yet learned the information in order to make these inferences and perform automatic auditory cognitive closure. As such, the importance of hearing and access to auditory input combined with an adequate listening comprehension is paramount to student success in education. I'm sure for many of you that these images are not unfamiliar. It is widely understood that there are multiple elements that contribute to success in reading and literacy, and that literacy itself and the elements of the Big Six, including oral language, phonological awareness, phonics, vocabulary, fluency and comprehension, underpin many areas of the curriculum. While assessments and interventions for decoding have been the focus of pedagogy for the past several decades, the importance of listening comprehension has received less attention. Recent research is showing that listening comprehension becomes the dominating influence on reading comprehension, starting well prior to formalised education. It also highlights a growing number of children who fail to develop adequate reading skills is primarily due to deficiencies in listening comprehension skills, i.e. poor comprehenders. Student success in all areas of listening, language and literacy begins well before they ever enter an educational facility. The foundations of language begin before birth and continue throughout life. We will expand on this further in discussing our literacy progressions and supporting the foundations of learning to listen and develop early listening and literacy skills. We know that not all children come to school with a full linguistic lunchbox. Many of the skills that children need to be successful must be taught once they get to school. And even if children do begin their journey with a strong foundation, it's important to understand that the context of education differs significantly from the home and other family and life environments. Conversations in the classroom are very different from conversations we have at home. Conversations at home are generally with familiar people in an environment they know well. In essence, the language is contextualized. The child learns language in a familiar place. When they come to school, this changes. We refer to academic language as something needed to support students' engagement at school. Research shows that there's often an achievement gap that is related to vocabulary gap. Commonly used words in the classroom, texts and tests are different from commonly used words outside of the classroom in terms of context, syntax and grammar. When children don't understand the language of school, they don't fully comprehend what they have read or discussed, and they find it difficult to respond appropriately to written work. Students do not either know or not know words. Often they know words by a varying degree. They may have seen or heard the word before and only have a vague understanding of its meaning. Specific vocabulary instruction and listening comprehension allows the student to understand where they can use these words and how they are related. This also leads to increased reading comprehension. It's important to note here that much of the meaning of the English sentence lies in the little words. The ultimate little word, the, its use or omission can change the meaning of language. There are approximately 600 of these little words, and each of them has a different meaning. These are words we never learned in a formal way. Our understanding occurs through incidental learning. They include 5 parts of speech: adjectives, pronouns, auxiliary verbs, prepositions, adverbs, and conjunctions. Deceitfully easy words, such as what you can see on the screen now. Much of what students are introduced to in class is not familiar. This academic language is challenging even for the student that begins school with a strong foundation in listening and language. As such, we must explicitly teach students to develop strong listening skills in order for them to build on their prior knowledge and engage in learning. We do this and often refer to this development of a schema. The development of a schema is described as an active organisation of past experiences. Interconnecting information within the brain is vital in assisting students to link or velcro on new information so that it sticks. Pre-teaching of vocabulary, building on past experience, prior learning activities, etc. all allow students to build a schema for new learning. The classic example is the new car concept, where often we are never aware of a certain version of new car until we buy it ourselves, and then we all note them on the road wherever we go. This is because we have built the schema within our brain to recognise this car. The same concept can be applied to learning and to every student in the class. The problems present when there is no information to relate to, dropped from short-term memory instead of stored in long-term memory. So in summary, we can see that the importance of listening comprehension has a vast impact on the success for our students. Going into the next section, I will speak about, firstly, how to set up the listening environment, so that before we even begin to teach listening comprehension and listening skills, or teach in general, we can set up our classroom for success. So how do we prepare the classroom environment for listening? In a recent study by Michelle Todorov et al., through surveying, interviewing and observing deaf or hard of hearing students in class, there were key elements reported by these students that they felt supported their listening and learning in class. We will expand on these throughout the remainder of the presentation. These elements can be broken down into a few different areas. Some of the challenges to engagement that the children reported were in relation to the presence of background noise, difficulties during small group, the physical effects on themselves, difficulties with their listening devices, difficulty with following multi-part instruction, and lacking their own confidence. Some student strategies that we used were sitting closer to the teacher, asking the teacher for support or adjustments, and ensuring they had access to facial cues. So in thinking about what affects the classroom listening environment, we can address some of these directly. The main areas that impact our listening are distance, noise, reverberation, and signal-to-noise ratio. We're going to look at each of these elements individually. Distance is a significant obstacle to understanding speech. Audibility decreases as the distance from the speaker increases. Doubling the distance from a speaker reduces the speech signal by approximately 6 to 8 decibels. So although this may seem obvious, that the further away we are, the less we can hear, it is often not thought about in the classroom. When we're teaching in certain areas of the room, often the sound does not travel to the student appropriately. Decreasing the distance wherever possible can make a huge difference. A typical scenario might look like this. A teacher's voice level will be between 60 and 65 dB and at a distance of 1 metre, meaning that for the students sitting closer to the front row, that they will hear this teacher voice at that level, 65 dB, and almost always will have 95% word recognition. If we move back simply to the middle row, only a couple more metres away from the teacher, we can drop by anywhere up to 15% in word recognition. It is critical that teachers ensure that they are as close to their students as possible at all times. Another factor which affects the listening environment is noise. Noise is described as everything that conflicts with the auditory signal of choice. The natural level of noise in a classroom when it is occupied is called the ambient noise. Research indicates that the average occupied ambient noise levels in Australian classrooms ranges from 35 to 60 dB. High levels of ambient noise significantly reduce a student's ability to concentrate, listen to, and understand the teacher's voice. Children have less refined auditory discrimination skills, thus making it difficult to understand the teacher's voice in the presence of background noise. Noise can be broken into two areas, external and internal. External noise is anything that is generated outside the classroom but is heard inside the classroom. Because in classrooms most windows provide ventilation, outside noise which contributes to high classroom noise can be difficult to control. Teachers often indicate that the greatest outside noise is from maintenance work, play areas, hallways, and adjacent classrooms. Internal noise is generated within the classroom. Internal noise is often more subtle than loud external noise, but can still contribute significantly to poor acoustics and the listening environment. It can include noise created by fans, computers, printers, or other equipment. This noise is often not noticed by adults because of their advanced listening ability. Such noises, however, may be distracting for students and make it difficult for them to understand instruction in the classroom. The cafe effect refers to the increased noise within an environment where individuals are competing to be heard over the noise around them as they are experienced often in a cafe. If somebody attempts to speak while others are speaking, they need to be louder to be heard. This then generates an increase in others' voices in order for them to be heard, in an ongoing competition that ends in an increase in total volume and noise level. This effect occurs often and daily in classrooms. Reverberation time is defined as the time taken for the sound level to fall by 60 dB after the source of the sound is switched off. Sound bounces off hard surfaces such as painted walls, vinyl floors, windows, so that the listener hears several indistinct, overlapping versions which smear the original sound. The sound continues for a time, reflecting around after it has stopped from its source. This is called reverberation. The length of time that echoes take to die away is called reverberation time. If the reverberation time is too long, the extended reflected sound masks or blurs the direct sound, which makes it hard to understand what someone is saying. The perception of speech for listeners is significantly reduced when the reverberation time exceeds more than 0.4 to 0.5 seconds. The final element that affects the listening environment is the signal-to-noise ratio. The signal-to-noise ratio is the relationship between the primary signal, such as the teacher's voice, and the background noise. The presence of poor signal-to-noise ratio will negatively affect speech recognition in the classroom for the student. The quieter the room and more favourable the signal-to-noise ratio, the clearer the auditory signal will be for the brain. So as an example, if the background noise was 60 decibels and the teacher's voice was 65, then this equates to a signal-to-noise ratio of +5. Adults with normal hearing and intact listening skills require a consistent signal-to-noise ratio of approximately +6 for the appropriate reception of intelligible speech. Children need a much more favourable signal-to-noise ratio because of their neurological immaturity and lack of language experience that reduces their ability to perform auditory cognitive closure. The recommended minimum signal-to-noise ratio necessary for students to hear efficiently and effectively in classrooms is +12 to +15, and +20 is preferred when considering children with a hearing loss. So how do we shape up? Numerous studies have found that recommended acoustic standards are not achieved in the majority of classrooms. Outdated classrooms and poor learning environments typically present with signal-to-noise ratios of less than 10 or negative ratios and reverberation times in excess of 0.8 to 1.0. Thankfully now, the Department for Education has specific recommendations regarding acoustics. Within their education facilities design standards, they address the need to ensure that acoustics are considered for any new build. So what can we do to improve the listening environment in the classrooms that we are currently in? Simply put, we want to decrease reverberation time and we want to increase our signal-to-noise ratio. Reducing reverberation time can be challenging without formal modification, but if we are able to do this, these are some of the following things we need to address. All materials have some sound absorbing qualities. The sound that is not absorbed is reflected. The sound absorbing characteristic of a material is rated as the noise reduction coefficient. If the reverberation time of a room is too long, it can be reduced by adding other materials, such as pinboards, carpet, and ceiling tiles, all with higher noise reduction coefficients. So at the classroom level, we can decorate the room with soft furnishings, such as beanbags, fabric wall hangings, or students' artwork. We can hang large textured work around the room. We can break up large open spaces by using bookshelves, cupboards, screens, tents, etc., or use acoustic dividers. In essence, we want to create rooms within rooms where possible and prevent the travel of sound around the room. In reducing background noise, there are many things that we can influence, including reducing noise from computers, air conditioners, or other electrical equipment, removing unnecessary noisemakers such as fish tanks or filters, turning off air conditioners or other noisemakers during specific instruction time, the treatment of pencil tins or other noisemakers on children's desks, the use of table mats or tablecloths on other surfaces. We can fit rubber feet to movable furniture. We can treat metal tables or chair legs, anything that can prevent the clanging and clashing of things in the classroom will help reduce background noise. Keeping the class door closed during instruction time, or door treatment and door replacement, any way in which it can reduce the external noise filtering in to the classroom. So in summary, we want to reduce reverberation time, we want to reduce the background noise, and we also want to reduce the distance. All of these factors will increase the signal-to-noise ratio. What we don't want to do is increase our voice as a teacher. We know that this is not sustainable, and increasing our voice does distort the signal of the sound. A way that we can increase our voice without changing what we do is to incorporate a sound-filled system. A sound-filled system is a device which involves a teacher-worn microphone along with a speaker or speakers which increase the teacher's voice level in a natural way without distorting the sound. Incorporating all of these elements will contribute to improving the listening environment for any classroom